This is the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com, the show that helps people convert to Islam with hosts from the US, UK, and Australia.
I think I had gone through a lot of things in my head, like, oh, my family, what will they say? What am I going to do about work? How am I going to tell people? And then I said, you know what? This feels right, and this is what I'm going to do. So I messaged the same friend who I had asked to teach me to pray, and I said, I'm ready to take my shahada. That I probably needed to know, because I was going to get a lot of questions from people as I continued doing this, because a lot of people know that I wasn't Muslim, and so they're like, why are you doing this? And they might have questions about Islam that I couldn't answer, because questions about hijab often lead to questions about Islam. I'm going to be wearing this hijab for 30 days, so I'll fast as well. I want the whole experience. And so I did that, and within the first, I'd say probably week, I could just feel something changing.
That's so funny. So it was kind of like a fake it till you make it scenario, because within the revert community, I find a lot of the time that the hesitations that surround, actually converting are what you talk about, which is like, is this for real? Am I, when I put on the hijab, I have to be this perfect Muslim, and all of these misconceptions that people have. But you actually started out in reverse.
Even when I was in college, there was a girl who I believe is a revert, and it never crossed my mind that you could just convert to a different religion. At some point, I asked my friend, I was like, hey, I want to learn how you guys pray. And I had no idea about wudu or anything. And so, because I would just literally sit there while they were praying and see them doing it. So I wanted to know what was going on. Honestly, most of the things, made sense to me. I was like, okay, I understand that. Whether it's something that you like or not, I always told myself, well, this is the better way. Islam came to make things easy, not harder. I don't know if I'm ready to put my hijab on. And I'm like, no one expects you to as soon as you convert. No one's going to expect you to put it on. Take your shahada. Okay, time to do this, time to do that. There's a learning process. And if you don't know why you're doing something, then it's going to make things harder. So take your time, learn about it, and then decide if, that's what you believe as well. I've gotten some interesting stares before. I always tell people there are different types of stares. There's the curious stare where they're like, what is she wearing? There's kind of this fear, what is that? And then there's the stare where that somebody does not want you in the same vicinity as them. So I constantly tell people that hijab is a choice that we make. Yes, it's supposed to be mandatory, but it's also, everybody's on their own journey, whether they're going to put it on as a teenager or later in life. There are a lot of people I see, they wait till maybe they get out of high school because of where they live. And I'm like, everybody's on their own journey, but it should always be a choice. I can't believe, sometimes I'm like, wow, it's been 2 years. And then sometimes I feel like it's been a lot longer. And then sometimes I'm like, whoa, I really just decided I was going to be Muslim. Sometimes it hits me.
Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to the Becoming Muslim podcast, a part of the Onto Islam website. If you have additional inquiries or would like more of this kind of content, you can definitely visit us at ontoislam.com to find it. There are wonderful articles as well as the podcast and resources in multiple links. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Ashley Pearson Khan, who was born and raised in Arkansas, USA. She converted 2 years ago when participating in World Hijab Day. So that's a very interesting way to come to Islam. And ever since, she has been promoting the acceptance of the hijab through her various social media platforms and World Hijab Day. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on. So, as I said in the introduction, you came to Islam actually just by experimenting with hijab and trying to support women who wore hijab. And that's so interesting to me. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about how that evolved?
Sure. So I learned about World Hijab Day, I think in 2016. I remember it was the night before it was taking place, and I think I just saw something on Facebook about it. And I had a Muslim friend, and I remember her telling me some stories within the stuff that happened in the town that we were going to college in. And I realized that her and some other women had a hard time because of their hijabs. People knew that they were Muslim. And so I thought I'll do it to stand in solidarity with her and the other college students because my friend was no longer there. So I wore it. I researched about World Hijab Day and decided that I wanted to be an ambassador. So I started doing that, and I participated for a few years. And eventually I wanted to get more involved, and I wanted to be a better advocate because I knew there were a lot of things that I didn't know that I probably needed to know because I was going to get a lot of questions from people as I continued doing this, because a lot of people know that I wasn't Muslim, and so they're like, why are you doing this? And they might have questions about Islam that I couldn't answer because, questions about hijab often lead to questions about Islam. So I met some women from the local Islamic center, and they were super nice. And I was going to miss them after spending, a few days doing World Hijab Day events. So I told them I'd come visit them during Ramadan. And there's a 30-day hijab challenge during Ramadan, and I had not taken it before because I was so nervous about not being able to complete it and, just a few other things. And so I had decided I was going to do that. So I made sure it was okay with work, and I was wearing it, and I thought, well, I'm going to go to the mosque. I'm going to be wearing this hijab for 30 days, so I'll fast as well. Like, I want the whole experience. And so I did that, and within like the first, I'd say probably week, I could just feel something changing. And I was just enjoying learning everything and just being at the mosque. I think the only thing that ever kind of held me back was I was just worried about a few different things, but eventually I said, nope, this is it. And I took my...
That's so funny. So it was kind of like a fake it till you make it scenario because within the revert community, I find a lot of the time that the hesitations that surround, actually converting are what you talk about, which is like, is this for real? Am I, when I put on the hijab, I have to be this perfect Muslim, and all of these like misconceptions that people have. But you actually started out in reverse, which is so cool because, you weren't a Muslim, you were just trying to support women. And actually, I wanted to kind of take us back to where it began for you. So your friends experienced what when they put their hijab on, or what were their main struggles living in a society, where the majority don't wear hijab?
Right. So my friend, for example, was from Saudi Arabia. So, she came from a place where, all the women were wearing it. And then she came to a small town in Arkansas where there is no one but, college students in hijab. And so she did tell me she had a friend at a restaurant once. She was leaving, going back to campus, and this man in a pickup truck started calling her over to him, I think. He was like, "Hey, come here, I want to ask you something." And he said something along the lines of like, "Why do you bomb us?" or something like that. It just scared them. And hearing that story, I was just like, whoa, I can't believe that happened. I was a bit naive about the area where we were in, because I grew up in such a small town. And Arkansas is part of the Bible Belt. Everybody's Christian. You don't really learn about other religions. And so when I got to college, to me, that was such a bigger town that I just didn't know those types of things happened. And then I went to a restaurant with my friend, and I remember this man was staring at us. And for a moment, I was like, why is he staring at us so much? And then I realized, I was like, oh, because of her hijab. So I just kind of stared back at him. I was like, I don't understand why people have to be that way. So
right.
Yeah.
So it became apparent to you once you started hanging out with someone who wore hijab that like, whoa, there needs to be a different conversation surrounding this.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, so let's take it way back though, because we jumped right in. When you were growing up, did you have any sort of religion that your household participated in, and what was the level of religiosity, would you say?
So growing up, we didn't go to church at first. I do remember asking my parents, like, why don't we go to church? And I guess I kind of always wanted a relationship with God. I had some books on my bookshelf because growing up, I was an avid reader. And so like I had Bible stories and stuff like that. And I always asked my parents. And around the time that I was 12, we did start going to church. And so my whole family practices Christianity, I guess. I had an uncle that went to church pretty regularly, but he was just about the only one. Then we started going. And then throughout college, I tried to go because eventually, like even during high school, my parents got divorced, and then it was harder for us to all go. So I think from age 12 to 16 is when I went to church the most.
What kind of denomination? So like just as in Islam, Christianity doesn't have like one blanket. So.
Right. Yeah, not a lot of people ask me that question. So my dad had always talked about how he thought we would be Pentecostal. They're a little bit more open, I guess you could say. Like there are some denominations where women don't typically speak up in church, and there are some who do, and different things like that. So we ended up going to a faith assembly, which was like a more relaxed Pentecostal, because there's also Pentecostals who only wear skirts and things, but ours was a little more relaxed, and it was a very large church. I think there were over 700 members of it, so it was a really big church, and I remember it was fun. But right. as time moved on, even in college when I tried to go to church, I really liked the non-denominational churches more than anything.
And why was that, do you feel like?
I'm not really sure. I think I felt more relaxed there. I felt like I would be judged less, I guess. But for some reason, something I think always felt like it was missing. I was always looking for a new youth group or a new church, and there was always something missing.
Okay. And so then when did you start deviating from Christianity? When were you like, maybe it's about time for me to look for something else? Or when did you end up not practicing?
So I think probably about the time that I moved. So I think when I was living still in that college town, I was going to church. And then I moved. I kept trying to go to church, and it just kind of fell out. And I'd say, even when I was in college, there was a girl who I believe is a revert, and it never crossed my mind that you could just convert to a different religion. I didn't know. So it was literally the moment when I was like, oh, I can be Muslim, that I really was just like, yeah, I'm not a Christian anymore. But that was a really that acknowledging that and knowing that my family was Christian was hard.
Right. Yeah. So, we can fast forward. You started wearing hijab, you did your 30-day hijab challenge, and you actually fasted, which is like one of the hardest things for a lot of reverts when they first convert. So how did your first fast go?
I think it went pretty well. I think one of the hardest things was being at work, because it was during like a summer down time for us. And so during that time, I was really close with my coworkers. We had this little thing where we would eat lunch together once a week. So we would go out one week and then stay on campus the next. And so we went out one time and I was like, I can't eat. I can't even drink anything. And so I just sat at the table with my coworkers and they're getting their glasses of water and ordering their food. And I was like, well, this is definitely challenging.
Right.
And I tried to make it to the mosque every night to break my fast. And then I had to do it a couple of times out on the road for work. So I would take some dates with me and then try to figure out what I was going to do for dinner. So it was like hard, you know, getting into that mindset of like you can't even drink water, and then figuring out a plan for when you broke your fast, because I tried to be at the mosque as much as I could. There were just a few nights that work kept me away, but I think that was a really good experience for sure.
And did you notice maybe like a mental shift at some point, or like a point where it was like, oh, this is actually not that hard, and the practicality of it became easier for you?
I think so. I think toward the end, and I feel like sometimes it is up and down, because I did try to get up in the morning. I think it was probably 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Try to eat something, drink some water. I made the really bad decision to drink tea in the morning, so I had some caffeine, and my mouth would get so dry. And I know that there was one time I had pizza for dinner, and having pizza for dinner and then trying to fast the next day is really hard. So, and I did that, I think, in the middle. So I was like, well, that was a rough day. I really wanted to eat and drink something because I wasn't smart with my dinner. But then after a while, it does kind of get easier. You kind of get used to it. And then you get to the point where I was like, and I still do this. I do this every Ramadan or every time I fast. Like if I brush my teeth or something, like obviously water gets in my mouth, I spit it out or whatever. But later I'm like, did I drink water? No, no, no. I either made wudu or I was brushing my teeth.
Right, right,
But it does get easier after a while.
right. Okay. And as far as like the mental part of it, did you try to pray at all, or was it just the physical fast that you participated in?
At some point, I asked my friend, I was like, hey, I want to learn how you guys pray. And I had no idea about wudu or anything. And so, because I would just literally sit there while they were praying and see them doing it. So I wanted to know what was going on. And I think at this point, I was already like, I should really learn how to pray because obviously something inside of me is changing. So I actually went to her house and I remember she's like, okay, so let's go to the bathroom. And I was like, what? So she taught me how to do wudu and I prayed with her. And then I don't think I prayed at the mosque until after I took my shahada.
Hmm.
So I technically prayed, I think, that one time. I think I was nervous I didn't know if I could pray with them. And so I was a little confused. Um,
Hmm.
I think I just did it that one time, kind of privately, trying to
But
learn a little bit.
but mashallah, this is so encouraging, even for, born Muslims or Muslims who maybe don't regularly practice or pray or even fast. Like if you can just take one of those things, there will be a shift in you and it will become easier to do the other things, because a lot of the time we get into that mind frame where, oh, I'm not doing all of it, so I can't do any of it. And that's like
Right, right.
not really productive. So I think your story really highlights the fact that, hey, you can start out small and build, and that's how
Exactly.
you become a better Muslim. So
That's very true.
That's an awesome lesson we can take from that. So, when you did actually take your shahada, when did that happen in terms of this whole experiment that you were doing?
It was the last night of Ramadan. Um,
Mashallah.
I think a couple days before that, I was sitting at the mosque, and everybody went to pray. And as one of the few who was sitting behind, I got asked to watch a lot of purses and things. And I was just sitting there, and I was actually reading the Quran. And at that moment in time, I had been trying to read a little bit of the Quran, and I was at the point where it was talking about Mary giving birth to Isa, and that was an important thing, I think, for me to see, because in Christianity, Jesus is so important, and so to see that in another religion, I think, was helpful. Um, so I was sitting there reading, and a lady came up and talked to me. I think two ladies came up and talked to me a couple nights apart, and a lot of people I had realized didn't know that I wasn't Muslim. And then at some point, a lady asked me, she's like, "Why are you hesitating?" And I really didn't have an answer. I think I had gone through a lot of things in my head, like, oh, my family, what will they say? What am I going to do about, like, work? Like, how am I going to tell people? And then I said, you know what? This feels right, and this is what I'm going to do. So I messaged the same friend who I had asked to teach me to pray, and I said, I'm ready to take my shahada. And a few people were just acted so surprised, and I was like, I guess nobody saw this coming. And I think a lot of people just didn't want to pressure me or, assume that I would. And so, yeah, we got ready to do that. And I had actually, I guess, in some ways witnessed a couple of shahadas, but because the crowds were so large, I didn't actually see the person and didn't really understand what was going on. So then after I did it, I was like, oh yeah, this is what was going on all through Ramadan.
Mashallah.
such
That's
a
amazing.
baby, like such a, I feel like such a, like a newborn, like I don't know anything.
Yeah, really, that is sort of what happens when you become
Yeah.
Muslim, because then this whole new chapter opens up, and you're like, oh my goodness, how did I miss all that? So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and that can be a little bit overwhelming, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a roller coaster of emotions for sure.
Right, right. Because you have that high of, taking the shahada and being like, yes, I found the truth and this is amazing. And then you're like, oh, but I have to like tell everybody now.
Yes.
So, so how did that part go for you in terms of like your family? And if you could give us a reference, what was your job, just so that we know like what
Sure.
environment that was?
So I was pretty lucky with the job that I had. I worked at a university, and I always expect universities to be pretty, open-minded. And luckily, everybody that I worked with, they were, and we worked with a very large, diverse student body. And so I had told them about fasting. They knew I participated in World Hijab Day because I think that had been the second time they saw me participate in it. They saw me take part in the 30-day hijab challenge. So then I sat down with my boss and I was like, I'm not taking my hijab off. I've converted. He was a little worried at first about how I would be treated because I did travel for work. And he was just worried about my safety and things like that. But that ended up being fine. Telling my parents, I didn't do that right away. I realized I wanted them to be able to see me as a Muslim, but not know that I was Muslim. So when I would go home, I would take my hijab off, go see them, and then leave. And I think that went on for about a month. And then I had texted my mom, I think, a night or two before I took my shahada, and I was like, I don't really want to take my hijab off. I've really enjoyed doing this. And then I basically told her, like, I'm converting. So she told me she would support me. She didn't know how the rest of my family would feel or anything like that. And I was like, that's fine. And so I think before I went to my aunt's house, my mom's sister, I let her know. And then at her house, I was visiting once, and I said, okay, I'm going to tell the rest of the family, which was just really my grandparents. And eventually I was going to have to tell my dad. And so my aunt helped me tell my grandma and then tell my grandpa. And they took it a lot better than I guess I had expected. I had expected to be like shunned from the family, like told I can't come over for Christmas or something. But there had been a conversation prior to that took place right after Ramadan when my grandpa had seen some of like the henna residue, like the stain. It was almost worn out on my hands, but he asked me what it was. And I had told them I was spending quite a bit of time at the mosque and learning things. And he was like, oh my gosh, she's Muslim. And I didn't say anything. And he expressed some concern. And my aunt was like, like, just let her be, And because at that time my aunt knew. So the next time I saw them is when we told them. And so I think because they had an idea, it went over smoother when I told them. And then my grandma and my aunt helped me tell my dad. And he was definitely concerned. So it was definitely a roller coaster for my family. Some of them were supportive, some of them were negative, and then it kind of flipped where the support wavered a bit. And then my dad met my husband and his family, and his mind has changed a lot since then. So I still have quite a bit of support from my family now.
So what were your dad's initial concerns?
Well, he definitely thought that I went to a liberal college, which in hindsight, I really didn't. He just thought that people, he also grew up in a very small town. He grew up in the town where I grew up, and you don't learn a lot about religion. So the only things he's ever seen are negativity from the news. And so he thought that Islam was this bad religion full of bad people. My parents and my family would always say, there's good and bad in everything, And so he was really worried. And then I think he was also worried that the beliefs were very different. My family's not, especially my parents aren't like super practicing Christians or anything, but like they still believe, and they were taught a certain thing. And so I think they were worried for me and like my soul, I guess you could say, in a way. They were like, what's going to happen now, type of thing. But it's definitely changed a lot.
Right. So has anyone in your family been influenced by your reversion? Have they maybe gotten a little bit more interested in Islam?
Not so far, I think, but the steps that my dad has taken are way different than what I would have expected. So for example, whenever I converted, he stopped interacting with me on Facebook, which was a pretty big sign. He stopped liking my photos, stopped commenting, and he did post some like anti-Islam, anti-hijab things. And then when that stopped and he turned things around, and he did leave a very nice comment after meeting my husband. He said, he didn't understand at first why I chose to pursue Islam rather than Christianity, but after meeting my Muslim friends and family, he understood a little bit more. And even recently, my husband and I went to visit him, and the TV was on a show, and they were making Muslims look really bad. And my dad heard it, but it was after like 20 minutes of me and my husband hearing it. My dad is like, oh my gosh, we can turn this off. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that it was going to be like this, because it was like a cop show or something. And in the past, he would have never done that. He probably would have made a comment, like a negative comment, but instead he was willing to almost like defend us. Like, I'm sorry, like this isn't how it should be type thing, so baby steps, I guess.
Mashallah, mashallah. Well, that's usually all it takes for people. And I can't stress this enough to the Muslim community. Like, you are the representative. So they're seeing all this crazy media spin, and I don't know how long it's going to go on for. And I don't know how sustainable it is, with the internet and everything evolving. But that's usually what people have been introduced to as far as Islam goes and Muslims. So it's really important for you when you meet somebody, you could be their key to finding Islam. So you always have to keep that in the front of your mind when participating in society. And it's a common theme in revert stories. They meet someone who's Muslim and they get curious, or like in your case, your friend was a hijabi. You saw her struggle, you wanted to help out, and then, you know, almost accidentally, you found Islam. Alhamdulillah. So it's really important to stress to the Muslim community itself that, you know, your behavior, your interaction with people is so, so important. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has told us this in multiple hadiths. And this is something, you know, that's just general for dawah. Just be a good person, whether you're Muslim or not, or, you know. So your family is coming on board. That's cool. What is the biggest change that has happened since you converted to Islam? Like, what was the hardest thing? Maybe what was the easiest thing? And then what has the thing that maybe there's something you're struggling with still?
You know, a lot of people ask me that, and I never know what to say. I've even been asked, you know, was it hard, like, not wearing shorts anymore, you know, like you put on your hijab, like, right, like I never took it off. So they're like, was there like this hard transition? And not really. I felt like I was like, okay, well, I have these pants that I wear to work. I've always kind of been more comfortable wearing jeans. And so the hardest part, I think, is just finding clothes that are modest, especially in North America. But
right, it's insane.
Yeah, because, you know, being Muslim, it's not, you know, Islam is not just a religion, like it's a way of life. And so for me, I guess in my mind, I was like, wow, this is, you know, the way to live, and this is the better way. And so it actually hasn't been too difficult. I think one of the hardest things, and this is going to sound so crazy, I think, not celebrating Christmas is kind of hard when you're living in America and it's all around you. And I'm so used to decorating, and I've always loved Christmas trees. So giving up my Christmas tree was kind of hard.
It is hard. I mean, and I think this is something that a lot of reverts try to underplay or like are embarrassed about. But I mean, like the more I've come to appreciate my journey and like understand that Muslims are supposed to be different. You know, we're supposed to be this global community that comes from all these different experiences. So somebody out there is going to connect with you on that idea. I know a lot of people actually who, you know, it's a time for family. It's like Thanksgiving and like all the holidays here. This like if you don't get together with your family or you don't see them at any other time, this is the time, you know? So I don't think it's really, it's all of it, like the superficial stuff, but also it's this emotional holiday for a lot of people. So I totally get it.
Right. And when you grow up doing something and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I can't do that anymore. It's definitely different, because I've been putting up the Christmas tree. I even put it up by myself as a kid. Like I would put it together because we had one of those Christmas trees that had individual like branches that you had to put in. And so it would take me a while. Then my mom would do the lights, and then I would decorate the ornaments. And my mom actually, every year since I was born, would buy me a new Christmas ornament so that whenever I moved out of the house, I would have all these ornaments.
I think that's like a major American tradition. I don't know. My mom used to do a similar thing too. So yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. Looking back at that now, it's like, wow, I have all those Christmas ornaments I can't use. And so I don't think she's thought about it, so I don't bring it up.
Right.
But yeah, I never think about holidays. I think when somebody asks what the hardest thing was, but you don't think about it until it gets here. And then you're like, it's going to be different. So I just really ramp up Ramadan.
Right. I think that's what ends up happening with a lot of converts. Do you allow yourself to get together with family on Christmas? Because I know a bunch of people have a bunch of different perspectives, and even the scholars don't agree. Like, can you go to Christmas dinner or can't you? So what's your take?
So I do try to go, and honestly, for the longest time, my family, they don't get together on Christmas Day. We usually go to my grandma's house maybe like the Sunday before, because she always said, you guys can spend Christmas Day at your homes with your immediate family, but come over for like lunch or dinner. And then my grandma does this really cool thing where she hides the presents, and we do a scavenger hunt. And I've been doing that for the longest time. Even in my 20s, I was doing that. So last year, since I moved to Canada, I did tell my husband, I said, I have to go back at least around that time, because this would be only the second or third Christmas that I haven't spent with my family properly, I guess you could say. So I said, I want to, be there for them. It's a huge change for them, me being Muslim. And since it is a roller coaster, I think it's important that I show up for them. And then I moved, and I didn't want them to feel like I had just kind of abandoned everybody twice. So I do go, but we tried to get presents for them during Ramadan rather than Christmas. So like I might get gifts from my family at Christmas, but they get them at Ramadan during our holiday. So it's a little different.
Right. No. Yeah. That makes sense. So as far as your interaction with the Quran, have you been able to read the whole thing from cover to cover since you reverted?
So during Ramadan, I made it my goal to read through the entire thing, but then there were days, I couldn't pick it up. And so I've gotten so close to being done. And then sometimes I end up starting over. So I'm not very far from finishing it completely. But I haven't finished cover to cover quite yet. But hopefully by the end of the year, for sure, I'll have finished it. But
Inshallah. So what have been some of your favorite things to read, or some things that you've read that have really inspired you?
Any of the stories that kind of go into some detail, I always enjoy hearing stories about Musa, like when he I think when he asked to see God, and God basically told him he couldn't handle it, and then God made the mountains disappear and he fainted. So I always love reading those stories. But then there's verses that have helped me, I think, because there's some similarities between verses in the Quran and in the Bible, and I think that is helpful. I think probably one of my favorite verses is verily in the remembrance of Allah, hearts find rest. I think that's one of the biggest ones for me.
Very beautiful, yes.
Yeah. And so, but I really enjoy a lot of the stories about the prophets as well, because there are some similarities in those stories, but then there are some things that I didn't know, and there's a couple of people I feel like that kind of get pushed aside in Christianity that you don't hear about. So I really enjoy that. So, and I'm taking some Islamic courses, so I'm learning some more of those stories and things, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, nice. So do you have a comparison in your head when you were reading the Bible versus when you read the Quran? Is there some kind of difference that you find, or what's, I guess, the biggest difference for you?
Sometimes I do have to remind myself. So, for example, in Christianity, when Mary's getting ready to have Jesus, Joseph is with her. That's a huge part of Christianity, is Joseph goes with her. And then I realized one day, I thought, that is not at all in the Quran. And I was like, so I asked my husband, I was like, why do we say that? And he goes, I don't know. I've never heard that before. And so that's so interesting. So sometimes I have to differentiate, what I've learned before versus what I'm learning now, and, remind myself, like, that's how it is in Christianity. This is how it is in Islam. So you almost have to forget some of the things that you learn because they're not correct. So
right.
That's always interesting.
And so how do you explain things like the Trinity to your family? Have you guys ever gotten into discussions about that, the difference between Islam and Christianity? Because I'm sure one of the main things that they're concerned about is, for all Christians, they say that you have to believe in Jesus as the literal Son of God in order to get to heaven. And so I find in a lot of discussions with Christians and even, my family, it's like, well, that's the basic point. And if you can't agree on that basic point, then they basically believe that you can't be saved, right? You can't get to heaven.
Right.
Is it that way when you're speaking with your family?
I don't think we've had like a super deep conversation about it. I think I've probably said something to my mom before. And I try to always be super lighthearted about it, because I feel like if I get too deep, that will push her away. So I think one time, just explaining why I thought Islam was the correct religion, I said, God gave Moses the Torah and was like, here's a book. This is how you're going to live life. And then we weren't quite doing it right. So he said, okay, Jesus, here's the Bible. And then he was like, you guys still aren't quite doing it right. So here's the Quran. And I was like, and that's it. That's the end of it. I was like, this is the last one. And I think she kind of thought I was crazy. But I was like trying to keep it as simple as possible. And,
Right.
we still love Jesus. He's a huge part of Islam. But you're supposed to, praise God. I was like, Jesus was a person, obviously we love him. I try to approach it that way. It hasn't gone super deep yet, baby steps for sure in those
Very
conversations.
important. Yes.
Yes.
So what are some of your favorite tools for increasing your faith in Islam?
So when I was first learning, I was honestly scared of YouTube. I did not want to get on YouTube and watch videos and potentially go down some rabbit hole of misinformation and hatred. So I would try to find, I guess, like podcasts or like almost, I kind of gravitated toward things that reverts were doing, and I really didn't even think about it. I remember finding Salam Girl, and that's a podcast I listened to for a little while. And during Ramadan, the women who did the podcast would go live in the mornings when they were eating sahur and having coffee or whatever they were doing. And so I would kind of join in on that to see kind of what their life was like during Ramadan. And then along the way, I have found different channels for reverts, whether it be like discussions that they do through Facebook and YouTube, group chats and things like that. So just really interacting with people. And then if I ever had questions, I would ask like a friend or two, and then maybe ask the imam at a mosque for guidance a little bit. And then of course, like eventually I watched YouTube videos from scholars like Omar Suleiman. I love Mufti Mink, things like that. And I do enjoy reading as well, trying to find Islamic books that are out there. There's a lot of good ones for sure.
There are. I mean, like with anything, there's like just so much knowledge that you're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Which one? Alhamdulillah, this is one of the most beautiful things about Islam, and I think also one of the most misunderstood is like people always look for that one answer to the question, and it's like, okay, some things we have one answer, like wudu. No one's gonna argue about wudu. Basically, we have it. We know what it is. Prayer, we're not gonna argue. But then there are those great issues where it's like, okay, I reverted, and music was a big part of my life, and now I'm hearing all these crazy things, or like animals, for instance. Like I know, especially Americans or like Westerners, we like treat animals sometimes like a member of the family, and then people revert and they have these dogs from before, and then they have that like there's that whole discussion about that one hadith where it's like, angels don't enter the house of a dog, of a house that has a dog and pictures on the wall.
Right.
So like these things for us, it's like a big punch to your face, and you're like, wait a second, like that's a bit
Yes.
weird. So, um, how did you kind of like funnel all of the information and decide, okay, well, this is going to work and that's not going to work, or like what is that process like for you?
Well, kind of like I mentioned before, like I might ask a friend, like, hey, what about this? Then I might kind of ask somebody else who was at the mosque that I knew just to see kind of how their answers matched up. And then I'd go maybe ask the imam. I'd be like, hey, I heard this. Is this true? Type of thing. And so honestly, most of the things, like made sense to me. I was like, okay, I understand that. Whether it's something that you like or not, it's I always told myself, well, this is the better way. Islam came to make things easy, not harder, type of thing.
Hmm. And for your betterment.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of how I looked at it, and I just tried to make sure that I was learning the right things the best that I could.
Hmm. But again, I want to stress
Hmm.
for our listeners and the general audience that there are multiple schools of thought, and we have scholars that can't agree on things. So it's okay. We're all Muslim in the end. If you believe in Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Quran, like this is our basic tenet, and it's okay to have differing opinions. And also, we should respect the fact that this is how Allah has made us. And that is why there are so many different opinions and a rainbow of scholars out there that you can basically find an answer to these gray areas and be comfortable with. Um, so, as far as someone coming to Islam, they've just converted, what are some top tips that you have for them to kind of ease the transition?
I think definitely go at your own pace. I was definitely somebody who jumped right in. I mean, immediately after, as soon as classes at the mosque started, I started a new Muslim class, an Arabic class, to read Quran. And then I was at the mosque, oh my gosh, at least once a week almost. There was some sort of event happening. I went to the monthly meetings just to like go and see everybody and just kind of hang out. I wanted to be there all the time, and I was just kind of soaking it all up. But I've seen other people try to do that, and it was too overwhelming for them. Um, and so I think you have to go at your own pace. Don't overwhelm yourself. So like if you're happy at home reading the Quran, do that. If you want to be right in the middle of it, learning as much as you can all at once, and you can do that, that's great. But I think there's, some people try to jump in too fast, and that's more than you can handle, and that's totally okay. There's a lot of people who've actually reached out to me, and they're like, I don't know if I'm ready to put my hijab on. And I'm like, no one expects you to as soon as you convert. Like, no one's going to expect you to put it on. Like take your shahada. Okay, time to do this, time to do that. There's a learning process. And if you don't know why you're doing something, then it's going to make things harder. So take your time, learn about it, and then decide if, that's what you believe as well.
Nice, yeah. I mean, I think it's the basic principle of taking that middle road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work well to lose weight fast. So,
Right.
To become like super Muslim, probably you're going to have some sort of backsliding if you try to do that. So,
Exactly.
little by little and make it a strong foundation. And then how about for somebody who's thinking about converting, but they have those concerns like you had, and a lot of people do have, like, oh my goodness, if I convert, it's going to mess up my work life, or my family is going to disown me. How would you suggest they go about relieving that anxiety?
I would definitely tell someone who's going through that type of thing to try not to let those outside factors affect their decision. Because I almost did. I sat there at the mosque and I was like, I was feeling this change happening within me, and then I thought, oh, my family. What am I going to tell my family? how could I change religions when my family is one and I'm going to be the only one? But at the end of the day, like, you're living your own life. And everybody reacts differently, of course, but in the end, you're always going to have a family. You're always going to have a community. There's going to be people there for you. And if you're learning and you have questions, I definitely always encourage people to ask multiple people that you trust for information. And kind of like when you first convert, pace yourself. Don't get overwhelmed. I have had a lot of reverts or potential reverts, I guess you could say, people who are thinking about converting reach out to me. And so I think finding that community is also important. You see people who have come to Islam. I think that's always really helpful. People like you.
Of course, yeah. Support is always a key. And as far as the World Hijab Day goes, so you're still involved in this? It's a yearly thing that happens?
Yes, so there is the annual event, World Hijab Day, on February 1st. So everybody is invited. So non-Muslims, Muslims who maybe don't wear hijab yet, just to take part in it. And this past year, we actually had a conference online that was really fun. So we had a panel of speakers over different topics. And so hopefully, inshallah, we can do more things like that. But then, like, throughout the year, there are different things. So, of course, we did the Hijab 30 challenge as well. And then we also asked for people to fast with us as well, whether it be one day or the full 30 days. So we had a lot of non-Muslims participate. And so I kind of have become the spokesperson for World Hijab Day. So I typically interview people as well. And so we do lives on Facebook and YouTube typically. So I interview people about fasting or wearing the hijab and things like that. And so just kind of getting the word out there, and then people coming together, even the non-Muslims, in support was really important, especially because this year I think we faced a lot more hijab bans and things like that out there. So that was really important. So we're kind of throughout the year trying to do work that will continue to spread that message as well. Okay. And we have a lot of initiatives going. So
that all sounds amazing. So, but I want to ask you personally, what does the hijab encompass to you? Because I know this can be different from woman to woman. And what are some of the benefits, and also what are some of the drawbacks that you have felt or appreciated since wearing the hijab?
Sure. So I think in the beginning, I thought of it as like, oh, well, this is part of the religion because of modesty. So, and I felt very comfortable in it, to be honest. In a way, it's like a security blanket. For some reason, I don't know what or when I switched gears, but I was like, oh, I feel safer in this now. Like, I would feel so awkward going outside without it, But now I'm like, it's not just about modesty. It's about the outward appearance of my faith. Like, this is part of my identity, and this tells people, like, hey, I'm a Muslim woman. It's not always easy when it's hot outside. I visited Texas.
That's like the major question you get asked, right? Yes. It's like all the time. It's like everywhere when it's hot. They're like, oh, but how? Aren't you so hot? And I'm like, aren't you? Like, we're all hot, bro. It's super hot out. like,
this is 90 degrees Fahrenheit. How are you not hot?
Right.
Yeah. So I visited Texas recently, and I was like, wow, props to the people who are in areas where it's very, very hot. Like, it's absolutely crazy. Canada is not too bad, but I think one of the hardest things was wearing it where you don't see a lot of hijabis. I've gotten some interesting stares before. I always tell people there are different types of stares. There's the curious stare where they're like, what is she wearing? There's kind of like this fear, like, what is that? And then there's the stare where you know that somebody does not want you in the same vicinity as them. And it's very obvious. But I can't imagine not wearing my hijab, no matter where I am, And I was very blessed to come to Canada. There are quite a few, and I'm always so excited. I'm like, ooh, a hijabi. Like sometimes I'm like, hit my husband's arm. Look, another hijabi. It's always something so nice. So it's definitely been, like everything else, like a roller coaster. It's like you have your good days and your bad days, but there's definitely way more good days. People say, you'll never have another bad hair day, but bad hijab days do exist. So sometimes.
Oh my God, they do, girl. Especially on those windy days.
Yes. You got to hold on tight.
Right.
But, I can't believe, like, sometimes I'm like, wow, it's been 2 years. And then sometimes I feel like it's been a lot longer. And then sometimes I'm like, whoa, I really just decided I was going to be Muslim. Like sometimes it hits me. Or like I see myself in the mirror and I'm like, hey, look, I'm Muslim. This is my hijab.
Right. So that's like kind of the physical aspect of it. Is there a mental side that just wearing the scarf brings to you, like that reminder to be modest in your behavior? Has your behavior modified, I guess, since you've worn the hijab?
Yes, I'm definitely more conscious of, for example, like a lot of people out there are so bad about having road rage. Like if I'm out on the street and I'm driving and I get upset, people are going to see me and be like, oh, it's a Muslim girl. So,
obviously she'll be mad. Right?
You can't overreact, basically. So I'm definitely conscious always, whether I'm just walking down the street or wherever I am, that I'm representing this whole religion, whether I like it or not, and so I've always enjoyed being modest, and even more so now. And so, yeah, I definitely, it's something I think about all the time. And so I always think, even if there's somebody who's not smiling at me, I'm going to smile at them, and try to just be as happy. For a long time, I wouldn't even wear a black hijab. I thought all these people who think Muslim women are oppressed watch these movies where the Muslims are represented in a bad light.
So you're more comfortable in society just walking around with hijab. It makes you feel secure.
Yes, I think if I walked out of the house without it, I would feel like and awkward. Yeah.
Right. It's just a part of who you are now.
Yeah. There was a time when I went out with my dad, and that was at a point when nobody knew that I was Muslim, and I had it off, and I just kept thinking, I'm Muslim and I really want my hijab on. Like that's how people know that I'm Muslim. And I was like, I feel so awkward right now. Like I should have my hijab on.
That's so funny that you go through that mental shift and then it's like, okay, I can't. Like this is who I am now, and I can't go without it. And so what would you say to that super annoying stereotype that hijabis are oppressed? Like it's somebody else telling them they have to wear this. How do you combat that with World Hijab Day?
Whew, it's a never-ending fight. I've been asked before, about my hijab and about my religion. I actually had a lady come into my office once, and she never even finished the questions. She said, so are your parents? And I said, no. She said, is your husband? And I said, no. And she said, so this, and she kind of motions to her head. I was like, is a choice. My choice. It's a choice I made. So I constantly tell people that hijab is a choice that we make. yes, it's supposed to be mandatory, but it's also everybody's on their own journey, whether they're going to put it on as a teenager or later in life. There are a lot of people I see, they wait till maybe they get out of high school because of where they live. And I'm like, everybody's on their own journey, but it should always be a choice for this woman. So if you see a woman with it on, leave her alone, and people have issues with bikinis. And I'm like, we're just covering our skin up. Like,
Right.
let us wear what we want, because you telling us what we can or can't wear is oppressing us. So,
Yeah, exactly. It's the opposite. Like your short shorts, you trying to put short shorts on me is oppressing me at this point. Like oppression can be on both sides, and I think that's such an interesting thing that people don't think about the flip until you bring it up, and then they're like, "Oh, well, that makes sense."
exactly.
Right. Um, yeah, so walking down the street with your husband, because I get this a lot. Like when I'm by myself, I feel like people are a little bit more confused. But like if I'm walking with my husband somewhere, if anyone gets the stares, it's sometimes he'll get like those death glares, like, "Oh, you're making her wear hijab." Have you ever experienced something like that?
People do automatically assume that I converted for him.
Ah,
And I'm
which is
like,
annoying, isn't it?
yes. I'm like, no, no, I did this on my own. I wear
Right.
a hijab. I think people are often confused though, because I'm a white convert, like I'm this white woman, and sometimes I do look Middle Eastern, I guess, in my hijab to people. I get that all the time. But my husband's Pakistani, and
Hmm.
so I think we do confuse people a lot. And I'm just like, every time I see somebody staring, I'm like, either they don't like Muslims, or they're like, wow, this guy really converted this girl or is making her do this.
Right.
It's like, I wish that people didn't assume that. Um, so I always tell people that I am definitely welcome to questions. I would rather those people who are staring at me ask me a question and just be like, hey, can I, ask you about your hijab, or can I ask you about this? And I have had a lady in a grocery store one time, she turned around. I was wearing a dress and a green hijab, and she's like, well, this, and she like motions like her whole body. She's like, is actually kind of pretty. And I was like, thank you. She's like, are you hot in that? I'm like,
The
it's hot
most
outside, but I'm not much
right,
hotter than you are.
right. The
you
second
know,
most asked question after, does your husband make you wear that or whatever? Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah,
anyone,
but
yeah, I don't think anyone's ever outright asked, does your husband make you do that? They just
mm,
automatically go to, wow, you poor oppressed girl. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not.
right. You misunderstand, but that's okay. That's why I do World Hijab Day every year,
Exactly.
and it's gonna get better, inshallah. Well, Ashley, it's been an amazing conversation. We've brought up some great points for those thinking of converting, those who have newly converted, and of course, just those generally interested in such a topic. Do you have any parting words of advice or maybe anything we haven't touched on that you think is really important to mention?
I think it was a pretty good talk. I feel like we hit all the points. I feel like, though, somebody who is new would definitely probably have a really good question, but ask those questions. And like I mentioned before, ask questions, learn at your pace. But I hope everybody out there who's thinking about it finds their way.
Inshallah. Well, thank you for taking out of your time for talking to us and giving us your points of wisdom that you've learned along your journey.
Happy to do it.
And for our listeners out there, if you are interested in learning more about World Hijab Day or about Ashley herself, she does have a YouTube channel, and we will definitely link that in the podcast notes. Um, if you want more resources like this podcast, again, you can go to ontoislam.com and find a bunch of wonderful things there. I am your host, Christen Amer. It has been a pleasure to talk to Ashley and to welcome you here. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.